The first time he laughed at her, the whole room laughed with him, and she felt it in her chest like something fragile had cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft quiet break that only she could hear. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, smiling the way powerful men smile when they are bored, when they want entertainment, when they believe the world exists to amuse them. He had built towers of glass and steel, owned half the city skyline, and tonight he owned the room too. The restaurant was silent except for the clink of crystal glasses and the low hum of expensive conversations. She stood beside the table in her simple uniform, hands clasped, eyes lowered, invisible as always. Someone joked that she looked serious enough to play chess. He turned to her, amused. "Do you even know how the pieces move?" he asked, and the table erupted in soft, polished laughter. She nodded once, quietly. That should have been the end of it. But he was bored, and boredom is dangerous in the hands of men who have everything. "Sit," he said, pointing to the empty chair across from him. "Let's see if you can entertain us." Her manager froze. The guests leaned forward. She hesitated for 1 second, not because she was afraid of the game, but because she understood the trap. This was not an invitation. It was a performance. She would lose, and they would laugh again. That was the plan. She sat down anyway. Sadness settled into her like a familiar coat. She had worn it before. She had grown up with it. Her father had taught her chess in a small apartment with peeling paint and broken heating. He used bottle caps when they could not afford a real board. He used to say, "Chess is quiet revenge, my little star. You do not shout. You think." He died before anyone ever saw her play. The billionaire adjusted his cufflinks, barely looking at the board. "You can have white," he said generously, as if offering her a gift. She touched the first pawn gently, her fingers steady even though her heart was not. Around them, the other businessmen whispered. They were curious but confident. This would be quick. She opened with a simple move. Nothing flashy. Nothing bold. He responded lazily, smiling at his friends instead of the board. He made comments between moves. "You know," he said, "this is good for morale. Even the staff need hobbies." More laughter. She kept her eyes on the pieces. She did not defend herself. She did not argue. She felt small, yes, but not empty. Inside her, something warm still lived. A memory of evenings with her father. A memory of losing and learning. The billionaire attacked early, aggressive and careless. He wanted a fast victory. He sacrificed a night dramatically, as if showing off. The table applauded. She studied the position longer than before. Silence began to grow, thin and almost uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat. "What's wrong?" he teased. "Need help?" She shook her head softly. Helplessness tried to crawl into her thoughts, telling her this was pointless, telling her she was still just a waitress in a borrowed chair. But beneath that helplessness was something quieter. Hope, small and stubborn. She saw the weakness he did not. He was playing for applause. She was playing for truth. She moved her bishop. One precise square. A tiny adjustment. No one reacted. He frowned slightly, just for a second. Then he waved it off and continued his attack. 10 minutes passed. The room was no longer laughing as loudly. Glasses remained untouched. Even the manager stood frozen near the wall. The billionaire leaned forward now. His smile thinned. She had defended every threat calmly, absorbing pressure without panic. He began to calculate. He was not used to calculating this hard. His companies obeyed him. Markets feared him. People flattered him. But the board did not care about his money. The board was honest. He tried to regain control, pushing a pawn too far, trying to open her king. She waited. Patience was something life had forced her to master. Years of double shifts. Years of being overlooked. Years of swallowing unfairness. Patience was her armor. And then she saw it. A line. Not obvious. Not immediate. But beautiful. She moved her queen quietly. The sound of the piece touching the wood seemed louder than it should have been. One of the men at the table straightened in his chair. Another leaned closer. The billionaire blinked. He studied the board. His fingers hovered over a rook but did not touch it. A minute passed. Then two. The room was completely silent now. No one laughed. He made a move. It was the only move. She responded instantly. No hesitation. Check. The word was soft, almost apologetic. He looked up at her for the first time, really looked at her. Not as staff. Not as background. As an opponent. There was confusion in his eyes, and something else. Uncertainty. He blocked the check. She sacrificed a rook. A few guests gasped. It looked reckless. It looked desperate. He almost smiled again, thinking she had finally made a mistake. He captured the rook. And then she placed her knight down with steady fingers. Checkmate. No drama. No raised voice. Just a simple truth resting on 64 squares. For a second, he did not understand. He scanned the board, searching for an escape. There was none. His king was trapped, surrounded by his own arrogance. The silence in the room was heavy now, almost sacred. One of the businessmen whispered, "That's impossible." But it was not impossible. It was precise. The billionaire leaned back slowly. The color had left his face. He looked at her again, this time without amusement. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. She folded her hands in her lap. "Just a waitress," she replied. There was no anger in her voice. No triumph. Only calm. But inside her chest, something that had once cracked now felt whole. The guests were no longer smiling. They were staring at her with something close to respect. The manager looked as if he might faint. The billionaire stood up. For a moment, she thought he might explode, might use his power to erase the moment, to fire her, to punish her for embarrassing him. He was a man who was not used to losing. The whole city knew that. But he did not shout. He looked at the board again, then at her. "You let me think I was winning," he said slowly. She answered honestly. "You were winning. You just stopped paying attention." A few of the guests could not hide their reactions. One actually laughed, but not at her. The billionaire inhaled deeply. The arrogance that had filled the room earlier was gone. In its place was something raw. Realization. He extended his hand across the table. It was not a performance now. It was acknowledgement. She hesitated only a second before shaking it. His grip was firm, but not dominant. "How long have you been playing?" he asked. "Since I was 6, she said. "My father taught me." "Are you ranked?" he asked. She shook her head. "No time. No money." The answer hung in the air like a quiet accusation, not directed at him personally, but at a world that measures talent by opportunity. He looked around at his powerful friends, at the luxury surrounding them, at the staff standing silently against the walls. Something shifted in his expression. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will not be serving tables." The manager gasped softly. She felt a flash of fear. Was this revenge wrapped in politeness? But his voice was steady. "Tomorrow, you will come to my office. I fund national tournaments. I sponsor grandmasters. And apparently, I have been blind." The room was stunned. She did not smile widely. She did not cry. She simply nodded. Hope, which had once been small and fragile, now stood taller inside her. Not because a billionaire approved of her, but because justice had unfolded on its own, slowly and undeniably. The guests began speaking at once, asking questions, replaying the final moves. The billionaire did not join them. He was still studying the board, replaying the moment he underestimated a quiet girl in a simple uniform. She stood up from the chair and stepped away from the table. For the first time that evening, she felt seen. Not pitied. Not mocked. Seen. As she returned to her duties, the other staff looked at her differently. Word spread quickly through the restaurant. The girl who had been invisible was now the center of whispered admiration. The billionaire watched her from across the room, not with ownership, but with curiosity. He had built empires by recognizing value. Tonight, he had almost missed something priceless. When she finished her shift, he was waiting near the exit. Not surrounded by security. Not laughing with friends. Alone. "You did not seem surprised," he said quietly. She thought for a moment. "I have lost many games," she replied. "Losing does not scare me. Being underestimated does." He nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. Outside, the city lights reflected in the glass towers he owned. For years, he had believed power meant control. Tonight, a waitress had shown him that true power could sit quietly across from you, patient and unafraid. As she walked into the night air, her steps were calm. The sadness that once defined her had softened. The helplessness had faded. Hope had grown roots. Patience had done its work. And justice, unexpected and clean, had arrived not with noise, but with a single quiet word. Checkmate.